The sky above Kepler 442b burned red with falling death. Commander Veltar pressed his six-fingered hand against the crystal wall of his command center and watched his world die. For 3 months, the hive had been eating everything in their path. Planet after planet had gone silent. Now it was his turn. The Zilani were a peaceful race. Their crystal cities gleamed like jewels under twin suns, and their people had never known real war. They built machines that sang with energy and grew food that tasted like starlight. Their weapons were made for hunting dangerous animals, not for fighting an enemy that wanted to consume every living thing in the galaxy. Veltar looked at the tactical display. Red dots covered the screen like a disease. Each dot was a hive ship. Each ship carried thousands of the insect warriors that had overrun his defenses. The blue dots that showed his own forces were almost gone. "Commander, the Eastern Defense Grid is failing," reported Captain Zorani, his second in command. Her normally bright blue skin had turned pale with fear. "They broke through Sector 7. We have maybe 2 hours before they reach the civilian shelters." Veltar nodded slowly. He had known this moment would come. The hive did not negotiate. They did not take prisoners. They consumed everything organic and left behind empty worlds covered in their sticky resin. "Send word to all remaining units," he said. "Fighting withdrawal to the capital center, we make our final stand at the Heart Crystal." The Heart Crystal was the source of power for their entire city. It was also the most sacred place on their world. If the hive wanted it, they would have to walk over Zilani bodies to get it. Through the crystal walls, Veltar could see the evacuation ships trying to escape. Most of them never made it past the atmosphere. The hive bioships picked them off, like predators hunting small prey. Each explosion in the sky meant hundreds more of his people were dead. The hive warriors were 8 feet tall with 4 arms and armor that looked like black insect shells. They moved fast and hit hard. Their claws could cut through Zilani crystal armor like it was soft clay. Worse, they felt no fear and no pain. When one fell, 3 more took its place. "Sir, we are receiving transmission requests from 17 different sectors," said Lieutenant Mordaunt from the communications station. "They are all requesting immediate evacuation support." "Tell them we have no ships left to send," Veltar replied. It hurt to say those words. As a commander, his job was to protect his people. Now all he could do was watch them die. The first hive warriors reached the outer walls of the capital just as the sun began to set. The Zilani defenders met them with energy weapons that fired beams of concentrated light. The weapons worked well against normal armor, but the hive had adapted. Their shells absorbed most of the energy and reflected the rest. Veltar picked up his own weapon and walked to the front lines. If his people were going to die, he would die with them. The heart crystal pulsed behind him, sending waves of blue light through the city. It had powered their civilization for 1,000 years. Soon the hive would drain it dry. The battle was brutal and short. Zilani soldiers fired their weapons until the power cells ran empty, then tried to fight with crystal blades. The hive warriors cut through them like they were made of paper. Green blood sprayed across the crystal walls as Veltar's people fell one by one. "Commander, fall back to the inner chamber," shouted Captain Zorani as she fired her weapon at 3 hive warriors. Her shots hit their shells and bounced away harmlessly. One of the creatures leaped forward and drove its claws through her chest. She fell without making a sound. Veltar pulled out his emergency communicator. It was a long-range device that could send messages across the galaxy. He had been saving it for this moment. With shaking hands, he activated the distress beacon. "This is Commander Veltar of the Zilani Defense Force on Kepler 442b. He spoke into the device. "We are under attack by the hive. Our defenses have failed. Our people are dying. If anyone receives this message, please remember us. Tell the galaxy that we fought with honor." He paused as explosions echoed through the command center. The hive had broken through the main doors. Their clicking sounds filled the air like 1,000 angry insects. "The hive cannot be stopped," he continued. "They consume everything. They show no mercy. If you value your lives, stay away from this sector. Save yourselves while you still can." The communicator crackled with static. Veltar did not know if his message had been sent. The Hive's bioships created interference that blocked most transmissions. He could only hope that someone, somewhere, had heard his warning. The last of his soldiers fell as the Hive warriors poured into the command center. Veltar stood alone before the heart crystal, his weapon empty and useless in his hands. The lead Hive warrior was bigger than the others, with scars covering its black shell. It looked at him with compound eyes that showed no emotion. "You cannot have it," Veltar said, standing between the creature and the crystal. "I will not let you drain the heart of my world." The warrior tilted its head and made a sound like breaking glass. It was laughing at him. With one casual swipe of its claws, it knocked Veltar aside. He hit the crystal wall hard and felt bones break. Pain shot through his body as he slid to the floor. The Hive warrior approached the heart crystal and placed its claws against the surface. The blue light began to dim as the creature started draining the energy. All across the city, the lights went out one by one. Veltar lay on the ground, bleeding green blood onto the crystal floor. His vision was going dark, but he could still see the tactical display. Every blue dot that represented his forces had gone out. Only red remained. 3 weeks earlier, the Zilani had sent messages to every member of the Galactic Council asking for help. The replies had all been the same. The Hive was too dangerous. The outer rim systems were too far away. Military resources could not be spared for a hopeless cause. The peaceful races of the galaxy had written them off as acceptable losses. As consciousness faded, Veltar thought about his daughter Lysara. She had been on one of the evacuation ships that tried to escape 3 days ago. He hoped she had made it out of the system before the Hive ships caught her. At least one member of his family should survive to remember their world. The heart crystal's light went out completely. Darkness fell over the capital city of Lumenspire. The Hive had won another victory in their march across the galaxy. Soon they would move on to the next world, and the next until nothing living remained. But deep in space, far beyond the Hive sensor range, something was moving. Ships with hull markings that no one in this sector had ever seen before were changing course toward Kepler 442b. They had received a distress call. The ships were small compared to the massive Hive biovessels. Their crews were from a young species that most galactic races barely knew existed. They came from a small blue and green world in an unremarkable system called Sol. The humans were coming to war. Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the USSC Defiant and stared at the message that had just appeared on his screen. The transmission was 3 weeks old and came from a star system he had never heard of. The alien voice spoke in broken Galactic Standard, but the fear in those words needed no translation. "Sir, should we forward this to command?" asked Lieutenant Amy Rodriguez, his communications officer. She was young, maybe 25, with the kind of sharp eyes that missed nothing. "Protocol says we should report any contact with unknown species." Morrison read the message again. "Commander Veltar of the Zilani Defense Force, under attack by something called the Hive. People dying. A plea for help that had traveled through space for weeks before reaching them. How long would it take to get a response from Earth Command?" Morrison asked. Rodriguez checked her computer. "At least 6 weeks, sir. Maybe 8 if they want to send a full diplomatic team to investigate first." Morrison looked around his bridge. The Defiant was an exploration vessel, not a warship. His crew of 43 people had signed up to map star systems and make contact with new civilizations. They had not signed up to fight wars. But Morrison had fought wars before. He had been a Marine during the Martian Rebellion, back when the colonies tried to break away from Earth. He knew what it sounded like when someone was about to die. "Navigation, plot a course for the Kepler 442 system," he ordered. "Sir?" Lieutenant Rodriguez looked confused. "We don't have authorization for military action." "We are not taking military action," Morrison said. "We are responding to a distress call. That is what the Terran Space Force does. We help people who need help." The bridge fell silent. Morrison could see his crew exchanging looks. They all knew this was not a smart idea. They were one ship with light weapons and no backup. If this hive was as dangerous as the message suggested, they would probably all die. "Sir," said Ensign Bobby Clark from the navigation station, "the Kepler 442 system is 4 days away at maximum speed. Should I contact the other ships in our patrol group?" Morrison thought about it. The Terran Expeditionary Force had 12 ships scattered across this sector, 8 destroyers, 3 cruisers, and his own ship. Not much of a fleet, but it was all they had. "Send a message to all ships," Morrison decided. "Tell them we have a situation. Any captain who wants to help can follow us to Kepler 442. Anyone who wants to wait for orders from Earth can stay here." Within an hour, 11 ships had changed course to follow the Defiant. Only the USSC Portland had decided to wait for official orders. Morrison was not surprised. Captain Phillips had always been a by-the-book officer. The 4-day journey to Kepler 442 gave them time to study the enemy. Lieutenant Rodriguez worked with Dr. Susan Baker, the fleet science officer, to analyze everything they could find about the hive. The information was not encouraging. "They have been moving through this part of the galaxy for 6 months, Dr. Baker reported during a video conference with all the ship captains. 17 planets have gone silent. No survivors found on any of them. "What are we dealing with?" asked Captain Danny Williams of the destroyer USSC Ranger. He was an older man with gray hair and scars on his face from the Jupiter mining wars. "From what we can tell, they are a biological species that consumes other life forms," Dr. Baker replied. "Their ships appear to be grown rather than built, living vessels with organic weapons." Captain Lisa Chen of the cruiser USSC Vigilant leaned forward on her screen. "What about their ground forces?" "Large insectoid creatures with natural armor and close combat weapons," Dr. Baker said. "They seem to operate as a collective like bees or ants. No individual thinking, just following orders from some kind of central command." Morrison studied the data. The hive sounded like something out of a nightmare. But humans had faced nightmares before and won. "Recommendations?" he asked. "We should wait for reinforcements," said Captain Tony Martinez of the destroyer USSC Hammer. "This is too big for 12 ships." "Those people don't have time for us to wait," Morrison replied, "if they are even still alive." The conversation continued for another hour, but Morrison had already made his decision. They would go to Kepler 442 and do what they could. If that meant dying in the process, at least they would die trying to save someone else. When they arrived at the Kepler 442 system, the sight that greeted them was worse than anything they had imagined. The planet was half covered in a dark substance that looked like tree sap. Huge organic ships floated in orbit, their hulls pulsing with bioluminescent patterns. "Jesus Christ," whispered Lieutenant Rodriguez. "Look at the size of those things." The hive bioships were massive, some of them over a mile long. They looked like giant insects crossed with spaceships, with chitin hulls and weapon ports that opened and closed like mouths. The human ships looked like toys by comparison. "Count them," Morrison ordered. 23 capital ships, reported Ensign Clark, plus maybe 100 smaller vessels. Morrison did the math. 23 to 12. Those were not good odds, especially when the enemy ships were so much bigger. "Sir, we are receiving a transmission," Lieutenant Rodriguez said. "It's coming. From the planet surface. Put it through." The voice that came through the speakers was weak and filled with static. It spoke in the same alien language as the distress call, but the universal translator made it understandable. "Unknown vessels, this is Commander Veltar of the Zalani Defense Force. I don't know who you are, but you need to leave this system immediately. The hive will destroy you." Morrison picked up the microphone. "Commander Veltar, this is Captain Jake Morrison of the Terran Space Force. We received your distress call. We are here to help." There was a long pause. Then, "Terran? I do not know this species. You must listen to me. The hive cannot be defeated. They have consumed 17 worlds. Save yourselves while you can." "We don't abandon people in trouble," Morrison replied. "How many of your people are still alive?" "Perhaps a few thousand in the deep shelters," Veltar said, "but the hive will find them soon. Their bioships are draining our planet's energy. When they finish, Nothing will be left alive. Morrison looked around his bridge. His crew was watching him, waiting for orders. He could see the fear in their eyes, but also something else. Determination. They had come this far. They were not going to turn back now. All ships, battle stations, Morrison announced over the fleet communications. We are going in. Sir, the hive ships are moving, reported Ensign Clark. They are forming up to intercept us. Good, Morrison said. That means they see us as a threat. The bioships moved like living creatures flowing through space with organic grace. Their weapon ports opened to reveal rows of what looked like teeth. Energy began to build in their gullets. Weapons free, Morrison ordered. All ships pick your targets and fire at will. The battle for Kepler 442 began with a storm of light and energy. Human missiles streaked through space toward the massive bioships, while organic projectiles that looked like living things fired back. The Defiant shook as the first enemy shots hit their shields. Direct hit on the lead bioship, reported Lieutenant Rodriguez. No apparent damage. Morrison gritted his teeth. This was going to be a long fight. But humans had not come this far to give up at the first sign of trouble. They had come to save the Zilani, and they were going to do exactly that, even if it killed them all. The first human missiles hit the hive bioships and exploded in brilliant flashes of light. Sergeant First Class Tony Martinez watched from the drop bay of the USSC Defiant as the enemy vessels absorbed the damage like it was nothing. Their organic hulls rippled and healed themselves within seconds. Well, that's not good, said Corporal Danny Williams, checking his assault rifle for the third time. The other Marines in the drop bay laughed nervously. They were about to drop into hell, and everyone knew it. Martinez had fought in 3 different wars, but he had never seen anything like the hive ships. They moved through space like giant sea creatures, their hulls pulsing with alien life. Rows of teeth-like weapons fired organic projectiles that seemed to be alive. Listen up, Martinez called out to his squad. We are going down to help the aliens on the planet. Intel says we are dealing with big bug-like creatures with armor and claws. Our job is to find survivors and get them to safety. Private Maria Santos raised her hand. Sarge, what if our weapons don't work on them? Martinez smiled grimly. Then we get creative. Humans have been killing things for a long time. I am sure we can figure out how to kill these bugs too. The dropship shook as Captain Morrison's fleet engaged the hive bioships above them. Through the small window, Martinez could see the space battle raging. The human ships were smaller and faster, darting between the massive enemy vessels like angry wasps. 30 seconds to drop, announced the pilot over the intercom. Martinez looked at his Marines, 12 men and women who had volunteered to jump into a war zone on an alien planet. They were scared, but they were ready. That was what made them human. The dropship hit the atmosphere of Kepler 442b and immediately came under fire. Organic projectiles that looked like living pods shot up from the planet's surface. One hit their port engine, and the ship began to spin. Brace for impact, the pilot shouted. They crashed into the crystal city of Lumenspire with enough force to throw everyone around the cargo bay. Martinez felt his shoulder pop as he hit the wall. Blood ran down his face from a cut on his forehead. But he was alive. Sound off, he called out. Williams, good to go. Santos, ready, Sarge. Johnson, all systems green. One by one, his Marines reported in. Private Lee had a broken arm, but he could still fight. Corporal Rodriguez had lost her helmet in the crash, but her weapon was intact. They were hurt, but not out of the fight. Martinez kicked open the rear hatch and stepped out into an alien world. The city around them was made of crystal that glowed with inner light. But the light was fading as dark organic matter spread across the buildings like a disease. Movement 2 o'clock, called out Williams. Martinez turned to see a group of hive warriors approaching. They were even bigger than the briefing had suggested, 8 feet tall and covered in black armor that looked like insect shells. Their forearms ended in claws that could cut through metal. Open fire, Martinez ordered. The Marines opened up with everything they had. Assault rifles, shotguns, and grenade launchers filled the air with death. The hive warriors stumbled under the impact, but their armor absorbed most of the damage. Aim for the joints, Martinez shouted. Between the armor plates, The Marines adjusted their fire. Bullets found gaps in the hive armor and green blood began to spray. One of the warriors fell, then another, but more were coming. A new voice came over Martinez's radio. It was weak and spoke in an alien language, but his translator made it understandable. Human soldiers, this is Commander Veltar. I am in the command center of the Heart Crystal. There are civilians in the shelters below. Can you reach them? Martinez looked around. The Crystal City was crawling with hive warriors. Getting to the shelters would mean fighting through hundreds of them. We will find a way, Martinez replied. Hold tight, Commander. Help is coming. The Marines began to move through the city, using the crystal buildings for cover. The hive warriors were strong and fast, but they fought like animals. They charged straight at their enemies without thinking about tactics. Humans fought differently. They used cover, flanking maneuvers, and coordinated fire. When the hive warriors tried to rush them, the Marines fell back and set up crossfires. When the enemies tried to surround them, they used explosives to collapse crystal walls and block the routes. These things are dumber than rocks, said Corporal Williams as he reloaded his weapon. They just keep coming straight at us. Don't get cocky, Martinez warned. There are a lot more of them than us. Private Santos had been studying the hive warriors during the fighting. She was an engineer before joining the Marines, and she noticed things that others missed. Sarge, I think they are connected somehow, she said. When one of them spots us, they all know where we are. But when we kill one, the others seem confused for a few seconds. Martinez thought about it. If the hive warriors shared information, that explained why they were so coordinated. But it also meant they had a weakness. Santos, can you jam their communications? Maybe, she said, pulling out a field radio. If I can boost the signal and broadcast on multiple frequencies, it might disrupt whatever they are using to talk to each other. While Santos worked on the radio, the rest of the squad kept fighting. The hive warriors kept coming in waves, but the Marines were holding their ground. Human weapons might not be as advanced as Zilani energy guns, but they were reliable and deadly. Got it, Santos announced. She activated her modified radio, and immediately the hive warriors began to stumble around like they were drunk. Nice work, Santos, Martinez said. Now let's find those civilians. They fought their way through the confused hive warriors to the shelter entrance. The massive crystal doors had been sealed from the inside, but Martinez could hear voices behind them. This is Sergeant Martinez of the Terran Space Force, he called out. We are here to help. The doors opened slowly, and a wounded Zilani appeared. He was tall and thin, with blue skin and six-fingered hands. Green blood stained his crystal armor. You are the humans who answered our call, he said in wonder. I'm Commander Veltar. I thought you were all dead. Not yet, Martinez replied. How many civilians do you have down there? 3,000, maybe more, Veltar said. But the hive will break through soon. Their bioships are draining our planet's energy. When the power fails completely, the shelter doors will not hold. Martinez looked at his Marines. 12 people against thousands of hive warriors, the odds were impossible. Then we better get creative, he said. Above them, the space battle continued. Captain Morrison's fleet was taking heavy damage, but they were fighting like demons. The human ships used their speed and maneuverability to stay ahead of the massive bioships. Their hull armor is too thick, reported Lieutenant Rodriguez from the Defiance Bridge. Our weapons are barely scratching them. Then we get closer, Morrison replied. All ships, attack pattern Delta. Get in close and target their weapon. Ports. The human ships dove toward the bioships like attacking hawks. They flew between the organic weapons and fired into the openings. The bioships screamed in pain as their weapons were destroyed from the inside. For the first time since the battle began, the hive was taking real damage. The organic vessels began to change tactics, trying to catch the fast human ships in their claws. But humans had been fighting for thousands of years. They knew how to turn an enemy's strength against them. The massive size of the bioships made them slow and clumsy. The human ships used that against them. On the planet's surface, Martinez and his Marines were learning the same lesson. The hive warriors were strong and numerous, but they were not smart. They could be tricked, confused, and led into traps. The tide of battle was beginning to turn. The galaxy was about to learn what happened when humans went to war. News of the human attack spread through the galaxy faster than their ships could travel. On the crystal world of Altair Prime, the Galactic Council received reports that shocked them to their core. The primitive species from the Sol system was not only fighting the Hive but actually winning battles against them. Council member Zephyra of the Crystalline Collective read the intelligence report 3 times before believing it. Her species had evolved past the need for violence millions of years ago. The idea that anyone could stand against the Hive seemed impossible. "Are we certain these reports are accurate?" she asked the council chamber. High Chancellor Morden of the Peaceful Alliance nodded his massive head. 3 different monitoring stations have confirmed it. The humans engaged 23 Hive bioships with only 12 vessels and destroyed 6 of them. "Impossible," declared Councillor Veltek of the Harmony Worlds. "The Hive has consumed 17 civilizations. No one can stop them." But the reports kept coming. Human forces had landed on Kepler 442b and were fighting the Hive warriors on the ground. They were using tactics that no civilized species had seen in 1,000 years. They fought like animals, but animals with advanced weapons and strategic thinking. Back on Kepler 442b, Admiral Karen Phillips arrived with the main Terran battle fleet just as the Hive sent reinforcements. 50 human warships dropped out of hyperspace to find over 100 Hive bioships waiting for them. "Well, this should be interesting," Phillips said from the bridge of her flagship, the USS Vengeance. She was a veteran of the colony wars and had never backed down from a fight in her life. "Admiral, we are outnumbered 2 to 1, reported her tactical officer, Commander Steve Murphy. "Recommend we wait for additional reinforcements." "Negative," Phillips replied. "Captain Morrison and his people have been fighting alone for 6 hours. We are not leaving them hanging." The space battle that followed was unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. The humans fought with a combination of military precision and controlled fury that left even their allies stunned. They used every dirty trick in the book and invented new ones on the spot. Captain Sue Baker of the destroyer USS Fury led a group of fast attack ships directly into the heart of the Hive formation. Her ships were tiny compared to the massive bio-vessels, but they moved like angry hornets. They fired everything they had at close range, then used their speed to escape before the Hive could respond. "Target their nerve clusters," Baker ordered over the fleet communications. Dr. Rodriguez found their weak spots. "Hit them where it hurts." Dr. Rachel Clark had been studying the Hive bioships since the battle began. She discovered that the Aito living vessels had nerve centers that controlled their movements. If those centers were damaged, the ships became confused and clumsy. The human fleet began to target these weak points with surgical precision. The bioships that had seemed invincible suddenly began to stumble through space like wounded animals. Their organic weapons fired randomly, sometimes hitting their own forces. On the planet's surface, Colonel Steve Murphy led a boarding action against a grounded Hive bioship. His team of 100 Marines fought their way through organic corridors that pulsed with alien life. The walls tried to heal themselves around the humans, but military-grade explosives made sure they stayed open. "This place smells like a sewer," complained Sergeant Lisa Chen as she burned through another wall with her flamethrower. The Hive bioship screamed in pain as the fire spread through its nervous system. "Keep moving," Murphy ordered. "We need to reach the command center and shut this thing down." The Hive warriors inside the bioship fought desperately to stop the humans, but fighting inside their own ship worked against them. The narrow corridors limited their movement, and the humans used that to their advantage. Private Paul Jackson had brought along something special for this mission. Before joining the Marines, he had been a demolitions expert in the mining colonies. He knew how to make things explode in ways that would give a safety inspector nightmares. "Colonel, I can bring this whole ship down," Jackson reported. "But we need to get everyone out first." "Do it," Murphy replied. "All teams extraction in 5 minutes." The Marines fought their way back to the surface while Jackson planted his charges. When they detonated, the bioship died with a sound like a whale crying. The explosion sent shockwaves through the Hive collective consciousness. Commander Veltar watched the humans fight with growing amazement. The Zilani had fought with honor and precision. But the humans fought with something else entirely. They fought like they enjoyed it. "How do they move so fast?" Veltar asked Sergeant Martinez as they coordinated the defense of the civilian shelters. "Humans have been fighting wars for our entire history," Martinez explained while reloading his weapon. "We are really good at it." The partnership between humans and Zilani was creating something new on the battlefield. The Zilani provided precision energy weapons and tactical coordination. The humans provided aggression and the willingness to try things that seemed insane. Captain Morrison had transferred to the planet's surface to coordinate the ground operations. He set up his command post in the ruins of the Zilani capital and began to organize the defense. "All units, this is Morrison," he announced over the communications. "We have 3,000 civilians to protect and about 10,000 hive warriors trying to kill them. Those are pretty good odds for us." The Marines laughed over the radio. Morrison was known for his sense of humor, even in the middle of a firefight. But the real breakthrough came when Dr. Rachel Clark made a discovery that changed everything. She had been studying captured hive warriors and found something that shocked her. "Captain Morrison, you need to see this," she called over the radio. "The hive collective consciousness is not just communication. It is also emotional feedback. When they experience fear or pain, it spreads through their entire network." Morrison understood immediately. "You are saying we can scare them?" "More than that," Dr. Clark replied. "We can traumatize their entire species. Every hive warrior killed in a particularly brutal way sends fear through their collective mind. If we hit them hard enough, we can break their will to fight." Morrison smiled. Humans had been perfecting the art of psychological warfare for thousands of years. They knew how to make enemies afraid. "All units, new rules of engagement," Morrison announced. "We are not just killing these things. We are making examples of them. Use fire, explosives, and anything else that makes a lot of noise and mess. We want their friends to see what happens when they mess with humans." The human forces began to fight with even more brutality than before. They used flamethrowers to burn hive warriors alive. They used explosives to blow them into pieces. They used chainsaws and other tools that made the deaths as horrible as possible. The psychological effect on the hive was immediate and devastating. For the first time in their species' history, they began to experience something they had never felt before: fear. The collective consciousness that made them so efficient also made them vulnerable. When one hive warrior felt terror, they all felt it. When one died screaming, they all heard the screams. The hive forces on Kepler 442b began to retreat, not in an organized withdrawal, but in panic. They abandoned their positions and fled toward their bioships, desperate to escape the nightmare that humans had brought to their war. In space, the hive fleet was also pulling back. The massive bioships that had seemed so confident hours before now moved like frightened animals. They had encountered something they could not understand or defeat. Admiral Phillips watched the enemy retreat from her flagship. "All ships pursue and destroy. We are not letting these things escape to attack someone else." The human fleet gave chase, hunting down the fleeing bioships like wolves chasing deer. For the first time in the galaxy's recorded history, the hive was running away from a fight. The tide of war had turned. The galaxy would never be the same again. 6 months after the Battle of Kepler 442b, the galaxy was a different place. The hive had been pushed back beyond the outer rim. Their expansion stopped for the first time in anyone's memory. 17 worlds that had been written off as lost were beginning to rebuild. And everyone wanted to know more about the humans who had made it possible. The Galactic Council chamber on Centauri Prime had never been so crowded. Representatives from over 200 species had come to witness something that had never happened before. A new species was being invited to join the council not as junior members but as full partners. Ambassador Helen Rodriguez stood at the center of the great crystal amphitheater and looked up at the thousands of alien faces staring down at her. She was a diplomat, not a soldier, but she carried herself with the quiet confidence that all humans seem to possess. "Honored members of the Galactic Council," she began, her voice carried by translators to every corner of the chamber. "The Terran Federation is grateful for your invitation to join this body. However, our membership comes with certain conditions." A murmur ran through the assembly. No species had ever made demands of the Galactic Council before. High Chancellor Mordoun leaned forward on his throne. What conditions do the humans require? First, Rodriguez said, any distress call from any world, no matter how small or remote, will be answered. The concept of acceptable losses when it comes to genocide is now abolished. The chamber erupted in discussion. Many species had built their entire foreign policy around the idea that some battles were not worth fighting. Second, Rodriguez continued, when the noise died down, Earth will establish military academies throughout the galaxy. We will teach other species what we call human warfare doctrine. Counselor Velthek of the Harmony World stood up. Warfare doctrine? We are a peaceful galaxy. We have moved beyond such primitive concepts. Rodriguez smiled, but there was no warmth in it. Your peaceful galaxy was about to be consumed by the hive. Someone needs to know how to fight the next threat that comes along. And third, she said, raising her voice, any species that commits genocide or enslaves others will face the full military might of the Terran Federation and its allies. We will not tolerate bullies. The silence that followed was complete. For 10,000 years, the Galactic Council had operated on the principle of non-interference. The humans were proposing to change everything. Chancellor Mordoun consulted with his advisors for several minutes before speaking. The Council accepts these conditions. Welcome to the Galactic Federation, humans. Back on Kepler 442b, Commander Veltar stood in the newly rebuilt capital city and watched human construction crews working alongside Zilani engineers. The crystal towers were rising again, but this time they were reinforced with human metal and equipped with weapons that could actually fight back. Commander, called a familiar voice. Veltar turned to see Sergeant Martinez approaching. The human soldier now wore the uniform of an instructor at the new Mars War College. Sergeant Martinez, Veltar replied. Or should I say Professor Martinez? Martinez laughed. Just call me Tony. I never thought I would end up teaching aliens how to fight. Veltar had been the first non-human to enroll in the human military academy. He spent 6 months on Mars learning things that challenged everything he thought he knew about warfare. Your people fight differently than anyone else in the galaxy, Veltar said. The other species, we fight to survive. Humans fight to win. What is the difference? Martinez asked. When you fight to survive, you accept that defeat is possible, Veltar explained. You plan for retreat, you calculate acceptable losses, you try to minimize damage. When you fight to win, defeat becomes unthinkable. You use whatever it takes. Martinez nodded. It was a lesson that human military academies were now teaching to students from across the galaxy. The difference between fighting not to lose and fighting to win. On Earth, Admiral Phillips stood in the command center of the new Terran Deep Space Command and looked at the tactical display. Red dots showed the locations of remaining hive forces, pushed back to the very edge of known space. Blue dots showed the positions of the new Galactic Defense Fleet, a joint force of ships from 17 different worlds, all flying under human. Command, Admiral, reported Captain Morrison, who now served as her chief of staff. We are receiving reports of hive probe ships testing our outer defenses. Let them probe, Phillips replied. I want them to see what they are up against now. The Galactic Defense Fleet was unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen before. Ships from peaceful species had been refitted with human weapons and crewed by mixed teams trained in human tactics. The Zilani energy weapons were mounted on human hulls. The Altarian defensive shields were powered by human reactors. But the real change was in the crews themselves. Species that had never known violence were learning to fight with human intensity. They were discovering that there was a difference between being peaceful and being helpless. Sir, the probe ships are approaching the Kepler system, Morrison reported. Send a response, Phillips ordered. In the depths of space, a single hive probe ship approached the outer edge of what had once been their territory. Its biosensors detected the quantum signatures of the mixed fleet moving to intercept. But there was something else in those signatures, something that made the collective consciousness recoil in primal fear. The probe ship detected the unmistakable pattern. of human aggression approaching at maximum velocity. It was a signature that the hive had learned to fear over the past 6 months. A signature that meant pain, death, and things worse than death. The probe ship turned and fled without making contact. Deep in the hive collective mind, the memory of burning bioships and screaming warriors was still fresh. They had learned that some battles were better left unfought. On the bridge of the USS Vengeance, Admiral Phillips watched the enemy retreat and smiled. That is what I like to see. They are learning. Captain Morrison looked at the tactical display. Do you think they will try again? Maybe, Phillips replied, but not today, and not tomorrow. They know what happens when they mess with our people now. The transformation of the galaxy was complete. Species that had been helpless against aggression now had protectors. Worlds that had lived in fear now had defenders, and the hive, for the first time in their existence, knew what it felt like to be afraid. Commander Veltar finished his inspection of the new planetary defenses and walked to the memorial that had been built in the center of Lumenspire. It was made of both Zilani crystal and human metal, representing the partnership that had saved his world. The memorial bore the names of all who had died fighting the hive, both Zilani and human. At the base was an inscription in both languages. Here stood those who refused to accept defeat. Here began the galaxy's new age. Veltar placed his 6-fingered hand on the warm metal and crystal. His daughter Lysera had survived the evacuation and was now studying at the Mars War College. His world was rebuilding. His people were learning to defend themselves. Hope had returned to the galaxy, and it carried weapons. In the distance, a new patrol of mixed human and Zilani ships lifted off from the spaceport. They were heading to the outer rim to keep watch for any signs of hive activity. The galaxy had new guardians now, and they did not believe in acceptable losses. Cuckers of the hive was over. The age of humanity had begun, and in the depths of space, ancient enemies learned a new emotion as they watched the blue and green ships patrol the borders of civilized space. For the first time in millions of years, the predators had become the prey. Hope was no longer gone. Hope had teeth, claws, and a very human willingness to use them both.